Hey, friends, welcome to the Invisible Strength podcast. I'm your host, Karen Wagner. Today's guest isn't an autoimmune warrior herself, but she's a fierce autoimmune ally raising a daughter with Crohn's. Imagine your kid saying, eating hurts, but I still have to try. That is Bridget's daily reality. In this episode, Bridget opens up about the unseen battles of parenting a child with chronic illness, advocating, navigating insurance, and finding hope in remission while teaching her daughter the power of her own voice. Stick around for a story of courage, compassion, and the invisible strength families can carry every single day. Bridget, we're honored to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
I think you bring a very unique perspective coming in as a parent and coping with autoimmune conditions. I know, unfortunately, autoimmune diseases are rising in every single age group, but they're rising at triple the rate of kids and teenagers, which is just heart-wrenching because I know how challenging it was going through a lupus diagnosis in my early 20s. I can't imagine dealing with this at 8, 9, 10 years old. But before we get into your journey with your daughter and Crohn's, can you tell us a little bit about you and your family?
So I'm a mom to three girls, ages 6, 9, and almost 11. And my 11-year-old was diagnosed with Crohn's in 2023. But looking back, she had symptoms starting at 18 months of age. So we've been on this journey for a while. And I'm actually a nurse practitioner. And so I know some of how the medical field works and different diseases, but I was pretty shocked that the healthcare community, I feel like they could use some awareness around Crohn's. It takes a long time to receive these diagnoses, and I feel like that shouldn't be the case. So I'm very passionate about raising awareness for kids with Crohn's, which is a type of inflammatory bowel disease, and just really helping my daughter carry this burden that goes along with being diagnosed. I feel like we've kind of carried a lot of it. So then when she's out on her own, this will be second nature, these things that we're trying to teach her and instill in her. So I feel like that's a great purpose to fulfill. Also, I homeschool right now, all three girls. So we're pretty busy.
I would say so with 3 kids too. I have 2 and I feel like it's a lot and I'm not homeschooling. So you said your daughter had symptoms as early as 18 months. Can you talk through that journey of what you were seeing up until the time of diagnosis?
Yes. She started with lip sores at 18 months of age. And I had no idea that the extraintestinal manifestations of Crohn's could present up to 8 years before any stomach problems. So she first got her lip sore at 18 months, and it didn't quite fit like the profile of a cold sore. And they would come off and on, and it got to the point where it was pretty severe, just covered. And I actually had this feeling twice, because she was 8 by the time she was diagnosed, that, Crohn's crossed my mind a couple of times. But I'm like, oh, but there's no stomach. She's not having a stomach that hurts. So I dismissed it. So that is one point I always like try to teach people. But anyhow, so we were going throughout till about, let's say, age 5. The lip sores were at this point getting worse. She starts to develop this pretty severe, intense childhood anxiety that's worse than just the normal childhood anxiety. And she had that for a few years. And we sought treatment, and it just didn't seem like it was getting better. And then when she turned 7, that was the year that things started to pick up. She did start to have stomach problems. She would have bowel movements after she would eat. We couldn't figure out, what's it from? Is it something she ate? Is she sick? It just kind of intermittent, but it was starting to establish a pattern. And when she turned 8, everything just fell apart. She lost 10% of her body weight. She was pale. She was having, her extremities, like her fingers and her toes and her face were cold to touch. She would get short of breath just sitting, uh, doing nothing. And she was a kid that could run around for hours. And then, of course, fatigue. There were some other little things that I noticed too, like let's say she would get a common cold, she would spike a high fever, like 103.5. That's not typical. So just like little things like that, that looking back, hindsight's 2020, but they were starting to present. And it's hard to take those symptoms in and say, hey, I think something's going on. But I really believe in the power of patterns. And if a parent can, maybe you don't see it yet, but if you're just kind of making mental notes or writing it down, you're going to discover that you can present the doctor with a lot of information. These patterns can be more identifiable if we're just paying attention.
Yeah, I've found that from in my own experience and talking to others in the community that early on, even though it seems sporadic and all over the
Uh-huh.
place, it's so important to just make note of what's happening because then you have some concrete evidence of the various things going on, especially with autoimmune conditions when they can be so all over the place.
Uh-huh.
But Bridget, you had thought it might have been Crohn's, but you dismissed it. What
Uh-huh.
made you think it might have been Crohn's?
Well, I knew from my training that Crohn's can affect anywhere from your mouth all the way to your bottom. It's the whole
Okay.
GI tract. And
Uh,
because these at this point that they were pretty intense. And we had even done a round of acyclovir, which is, given for cold sores, and that did not resolve the way I thought it should have. It didn't seem like it helped very much. But I feel like, and watching patterns, if you're listening to your intuition, you already know so much. It's just that
yeah.
we talk ourselves out of it. So like I said earlier, I wasn't aware that, and I don't think a lot of doctors are either, that these manifestations can happen up to 8 years before. So yeah, but with kids and Crohn's, that's one of the big presenting signs is the lip sores that just keep coming back. You can't figure out why they're coming on. Um, they're pretty intense. So
Yeah, it does amaze me that they can present up to 8 years ahead of the actual time of diagnosis or full manifestation. Like, that's just wild and goes to show how much these things don't just happen overnight, even though they
mhm,
can feel like it's a flip of a switch. During that time up until the diagnosis, she's having weird symptoms, but you don't fully have a concrete answer of what's going on yet. How did you help her navigate that period of uncertainty and just weird changes happening with your daughter that other kids aren't experiencing?
well, we're pretty open at my house and we talk like about poop and all the things.
Yeah.
So she was pretty articulate and she could come to me and tell me, well, I noticed this. And we would talk through it or we would file it away like, yes, let's keep an eye on that. So we were in counseling when she's still in counseling and just trying to have her she feels very comfortable to come to me and tell me what new symptoms she's having. She's very articulate. She's sensitive in her body, so she can pick up on things pretty quickly. But I do think that learning to trust yourself and having somebody say part of learning to trust yourself is somebody validating, hey, that is something that's really going on. Tell me more about it, or let's make sure that we note it so that we can watch it and see if anything changes. And something that, like, recently I feel like has kind of come up for us is this, idea that emotional regulation is kind of like where we want to be, right? So, because with these chronic conditions, autoimmune conditions, you're really stuck in fight or flight a lot. And I mean, even going to the doctor, right, can
Yeah.
make you because you feel like maybe you're not being heard. So trying to practice that, like first as parents, and then like modeling it for her so that it kind of pulls her, it pulls a person out of that and you can look at things a little more objectively. Like you don't have to make a decision right now. It helps you understand, like if somebody says something along the effect that, well, I don't think it's that bad. If you have that emotional regulation, you can step back and be like, well, I don't need to like say, yes, I do, and have an emotional reaction. You can be like, no, I know, this is what I'm feeling. And just coming from a place that keeps you kind of more in check. And I feel like it's just a better way to handle everything almost, right?
Yeah.
So,
I love that you said initially you validate her because so many people pre-diagnosis and even post-diagnosis when you're dealing with doctors and trying to get the best treatments for you, you can feel so dismissed. And we've even have
Mhm.
people being like, am I crazy? Do I have
Mhm.
Munchausen's disease? Am I making this
Mhm.
up? So I think that I want to highlight, you said the first state is validating
Mhm.
her and how she's feeling. I think that is just so important.
Yeah, and I mean, and I've gone through the being dismissed by a
Yeah.
pediatric GI and thinking I'm gonna be labeled crazy, Munchausen, like, it can really mess with your head. But I go back to, I know what I see. I'm with her a lot, and this is not being made up. I can see that she's suffering and wasting away. So, and I even told her one time, this makes me emotional, but I'm like, we're not gonna stop until we get an answer. I promise you, we will keep going because it does get to the point where you're like, "Well, if no one's gonna listen to me, then maybe I just won't say anything at all, right?" And that's horrible, a horrible place to be in.
That makes me emotional too because we've all experienced, like you said, being dismissed and not feeling validated or that our truth is our truth. But as a kid, I can't imagine how much harder that lands. So I think your daughter is incredibly lucky to have you. That's amazing. You had to fight to get a diagnosis and it was over a long period of time. Can you take us through that process of advocating what you did to finally get to that place where you had an actual answer?
Yes. So, and this is when I talk about emotional regulation, this is kind of a new thing for me too, and trusting myself more. This process has really taught me to trust myself. But I remember we went to the pediatric GI, and I had this little voice in me that said, ask for a calprotectin test. But I didn't because I was like, I don't want to come across as like I'm a pushy parent. But that's months later, we ended up getting it, and that was one of the tools that helped confirm the diagnosis. But I also want to say though, hindsight is 2020, and we have to offer ourselves grace, right? I mean, at that point, if they had done the stool test, it might not have been a level that was high enough for the doctor act on, and it could have delayed even more. So, maybe they wouldn't have retested it for 6 to 8 more months. I don't know, but the doctor pretty much had a box she was putting us in, and I'm like, no, I can't. This is not working. And I said, if you can't help us or not willing to help us, refer us to somebody who will, because this is not her. I am telling you, this is not her. And I asked, is this IBD? And still just very kind of wrote me off. And in my family, with my background, I I was doing all the appointments, and this was about like almost like a year into her being pretty sick, and I had to realize like my husband needed to come in and kind of give me a little reprieve, and he needed to be hearing some of this stuff because I just couldn't. It gets to be really exhausting. I remember like I didn't cry for like a year, and then like when she finally got her Humira and then she ended up getting mono right after, it just like, 'cause it was just like, I don't know how to describe it, but, I thought the Humira was gonna be the answer, and then here she got mono after, and it all came out. Um, because I kind of was in that, position that of being stuck, right? Like, I'm not being heard, I'm getting exhausted, I don't have anyone to help right by my side at every appointment. I pushed off getting a second opinion for a little bit, but once she got mono, I was like, "That's it, we have to go." So and then my husband started coming to the appointments, but I feel like people, maybe back years ago, getting a second opinion might have ruffled the doctor's feathers or whatever, but nowadays, I feel like that's very commonplace, like, nobody should feel that they're being disrespectful or anything to get a second and third opinion because there are doctors out there who do want to help, and you just have to find them. You just have to find them, and chances are you're gonna run into some that doctors are human, right? They have their own lives
Yeah.
and their own stressors, and that's gonna affect when they come to work. But when it's your health and your child, right? Like, that's what you're gonna give up if you don't speak up. So, yeah.
I appreciate this second opinion because, well, you even mentioned you didn't want to be the pushy parent. I didn't want to be the pushy patient, but I think it gets to a point where if it's not a clear cut diagnosis or condition, it often really depends on the doctor's experiences. And so it's not even, you're not questioning their degree or their qualifications, but sometimes you just need a different doctor with different experiences to be able to effectively meet you where you're at.
Yes, completely. I would agree with that.
Other than second opinion, do you have any like tips or thoughts for other parents who are in the position where they're feeling brushed off or they're just not getting the answers they need? What can they do to kind of help themselves in their situations from your experience?
I think trusting yourself is like huge. And I mean, when you go to a doctor, if you feel comfortable asking a question or if you feel like uncomfortable, listen to that voice, looking at your child if something's not right. And yes, it's really hard, right? Kids don't always have the words to describe what they're feeling, but taking the time and I think especially for the IBD community, finding other people's stories, right? That they can share symptoms and then you listen to them and you talk to your child and maybe they can help that can help identify what they're going through. It's parent, you need, trust yourself. It's going to be a long journey and having your supports in place, whether it's another parent or a person who can go with you to appointments or just seeking out people in the IVD community. There, a lot of times there's not going to be somebody in real life that but there's a growing community online and that's been very helpful for me. I remember when I first got on Instagram and I found a young woman who has Crohn's and it just like made me so happy because to see somebody, right, who appears to be doing very well and, you just as a parent, you feel you have to go through your grieving process of this is not what I thought was ever going to happen. Their childhood's going to look different. Their adulthood's going to look different. A lot of things are going to look different, but it doesn't mean that you still can't give them the best life. It's just going to look different. So trusting yourself, finding support, and just again, back to that emotional regulation. It's going to be a long road. So the sooner you can get to that point, probably the better. It's hard to do. It's so hard to do.
Yeah. Caregiver burnout is a real thing.
hmm
And you are a parent of three, you're homeschooling and you're managing all the medical appointments and everything else. How do you make sure you're taking care of yourself so you're not reaching that burnout point?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. No, I mean, I go to counseling, and I try to exercise like 5 days a week. I set it up. I have people meet on Zoom. So like if it's just me, I won't show up. But if I'm accountable to somebody else, I will. And I think that's made a huge difference. Just like doing yoga more often, that's helped a lot. And then getting to the point where being able just to kind of step back and see the bigger picture because it's really at the beginning I felt like everything was an emergency because to me it was, right? I mean, she's like looks like she's dying, right? She's so
Yeah.
thin and stuff. And I realized over time that there are medical emergencies and conditions like Crohn's, but for the most part they're not going to be like so fight or flight like I am, right? So being able to be at a point where you can step out of that helps you avoid the caregiver burnout, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because you don't want to stop taking care of yourself and stop carving out time to exercise, do yoga, whatever you need to do, asking your husband for help. It's like that starts to spill over into other areas of your life and it can be overwhelming and unmanageable very quickly.
Yeah, it's very one thing, it just compounds a lot very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned how important it is to you for advocacy, and I wholeheartedly agree. To me, it's crazy how many millions of people suffer from conditions like this, and there's still a severe lack of awareness in the medical field and just in the general population. How have you taught your child to advocate for herself and helping her find her voice?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things. When in the pediatric world, which is not the case in the adult world, I noticed that like her IBD specialist really, kind of set the tone of, I want you to be answering these questions. What medicines do you take? And I felt like that's kind of a nice environment to foster this, finding your voice and advocating for yourself. But I mean, she certainly has seen me, I won't stop till we get the answers. In fact, when the first pediatric GI doctor wasn't doing anything, I took her to a rheumatologist. I took her to an ophthalmologist because sometimes you can see autoimmune conditions behind the eyes. I took her to an allergist, and everybody kept saying, "No, it's GI, it's GI." So, just that persistence showing up, consistency, not, you can try something, but if it's not working, to go back and say, hey, I tried this, like you said. I don't think it's quite working. What can we do? I think that's important. And then the counseling has been a lot. So, and really, one of the most beautiful things that came from this advocacy around health occurred recently for us, or it was a result of learning how to speak up for your health. She had this who was not being very kind to her, and she didn't like how she was speaking to her. And so we worked with the counselor on how to set a healthy boundary and for her to communicate that to the friend. And she did, and it didn't turn out like we thought it was going to. But I mean, I really see a clear connection of being able to speak up for your health, like first for yourself, your body, and then being able to set the boundaries with other people. So, I guess for parents in this position, all these things that you're doing, there are going to be some really positive ripple effects. There's not a lot I would say that's positive when you have a Crohn's diagnosis, but if your child can grow up and know in relationships how to say, "Hey, that doesn't feel right. You can't say this to me. If you continue to do so, I'm just going to step away," and not be like at a big emotional drama, right? Just like kind of that emotional regulation, like, hey, this doesn't work for me. I need to stop. That's huge. Especially like when you do have autoimmune conditions, a lot of times you just absorb a lot of stuff around you, right? And then that can come out in your physical health. So that's not good. You don't want your child to be carrying the consequences of other people and then it shows up with a flare, right? So
I agree, though. That is a beautiful silver lining to a diagnosis like Crohn's is that self-awareness and self-advocacy. It's like I didn't even know what a boundary was till I was like 30. But for this a little 11-year-old to learn that, like that, those are lifelong skills that are going to serve her well.
yeah, yeah. Definitely. I hope.
For sure. Your daughter has two sisters. You have three girls. I know being on the outside, my siblings don't know how to react, how to support. Sometimes it can feel draining because there's so much going on. How have you kind of balanced that among your kids?
Yeah, it's at times it can be, I think that they feel like she gets more attention.
Yeah.
So just trying to be aware and then explaining to them in kid terms what's going on. And then also just having their own special connection or their special time with each parent, I think help offsets that. So we try. It's not always perfect, but I feel like that they have really learned that. I mean, another silver lining is that you know, my oldest looks like a normal kid, I guess. She doesn't physically look like something's going on, but her sisters know that, she can have a lot of pain and sometimes it can be really scary. Like just getting blood drawn used to be a big ordeal, or staying in the hospital, of course, is scary. But I think it really is a good lesson for them that you don't really know what's going on with a person. Right. And so to have empathy and, just even ask them or try to find out what's going on if something seems a little bit off, because there might be a whole thing that they can share with you and you can really end up having a beautiful relationship instead of like a not so good one.
And I think that's a important lesson for kids and a good reminder for everyone that we're all experiencing something and you don't know what another person has been through, is going through, how they're feeling. And so if even if it's not visible on the surface, just asking them, checking in and making sure like being there for them, I think is just incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about your daughter's experiences. You've mentioned like she's eating can be stressful. It can be stressful for me with lupus and trying to manage my diet. How has she and you navigated that?
Well, for a long time, I just wanted to have somebody tell me, follow this diet, right? I mean, because there's all sorts of different things out there, and that alone is overwhelming. And so the IBD specialist ended up suggesting doing a low FODMAP diet for a while. And I know a lot of people find that restrictive, but it actually, it felt like it opened a lot for us because some of the things that, like mangoes, she really liked, but that's not, it's not suggested on that diet. So,
Sure.
it did help improve that. Of course, it's just a lot of trial and error. When I was a kid, part of the fun of being a kid was eating junk sometimes. So,
Yeah.
and candy, but it's a fine line. And she certainly has to learn, certain foods are going to hurt and require you to take a medicine that might make you then kind of constipated. So I think she's learning early on this like feedback from what she's doing and then her physical symptoms, which is good. And she can read food labels. And I try to put it kind of in her decision making, like, so she's gluten sensitive. She can have some gluten, but there's a line where she can cross and it will cause a lot of pain. But sometimes, maybe eating that particular food, a little bit of it is worth a little bit of pain. I mean, it's like real life,
Yeah.
so just trying to empower her to make the decisions and then connect the dots if something doesn't quite work out. And then also trying to offer healthy choices that fit within her restrictions. Kids don't always like everything, so or can
Right.
be picky. So it has been, I would say that the diet is been that's still an ongoing process for us.
Are you still it's low fat, right?
It's low FOD, FOD. So it's like
Okay.
certain sugars that they don't you either get rid of or just uh, restrict. So like for instance, she could have a banana, but it shouldn't be too ripe because then I guess it could make it if it's too ripe, there's too much of one type of sugar in it, and then could cause her pain. But we were doing things like apples, I think, with skin or something. I don't know. I just remember that we were some of the key foods that she liked to eat were suggested not to be having
Yeah.
on this diet. But yeah, I would say that the food is still quite that's a big challenge.
Well, and that's why I ask about it because to your point, kids are picky. They want mac and cheese, pizza, and hot dogs.
Mhm.
So I was curious, like, are you packing her lunch every day? Like, what do the snacks actually look like for her?
We do now there's a lot more options of like gluten-free, dairy-free snacks.
Yeah.
So we're able to find some bars and things like that that she can eat. There's cheese puffs that are non-dairy. Um, she does use lactate. She's lactose intolerant, so sometimes she will eat like the mac and cheese. But since we homeschool, we can do more of the stuff at home.
Oh,
But like a turkey burger, she'll eat a lot of
yeah.
that. Of course, it's once you eat it for a while and then you get sick of it and she never wants it again, but like eggs, turkey burger, tacos without the good stuff, maybe you would say like no cheese, limited lettuce. So I would say those are kind of her go-tos for sure. Sometimes she'll be in a pasta, like gluten-free pasta, but I diet stuff, dietitian. I wish I was a dietitian. I just don't that is not my strong suit and it's just very difficult to do.
Well, sometimes you feel like you have to be a dietitian to figure some of this out. I knew bananas, obviously, they get sweeter as they're riper, but then that changes the compilation of the sugars that has an effect. Like, that's just a whole nother level of detail that you have to get into.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And she used to like love Greek yogurt, but now we switched over to coconut yogurt, just trying to find alternatives like that, which there are more than what there ever was when I was growing up, but trying to also do as much organic as possible, just like the less preservatives, the less sugar. That's all. She doesn't like take caffeine, but you wouldn't want to overdo chocolate, those that tend to be triggers for people with Crohn's.
In the long run, this is going to serve her well. but I can't imagine as a kid trying to navigate this. I'm sure there's been times where she feels like she's missing out or just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. How do you help her work through the times where it's like, yeah, this just really stinks, but we got to figure out how to get through it?
Yeah, I mean, really, just it's like saying, yeah, this isn't fair, right? This isn't it
Yeah.
really stinks. Like, back on the food thing, like, she loved popcorn. That she coulda ate popcorn every day, all day long, but that's a food you can't eat. So, trying to find something that would satisfy that. But, so it's kind of the same principle, like, maybe this isn't for you right now, right? But maybe later it could be. So, with homeschooling, she's not, I feel like because we can make our schedule such that she gets to do some of the things that she loves to do. So it's not like she's going to school all day long and being exhausted and then missing out on the extracurriculars that all her friends are doing. So she does get to do activities like gymnastics and horseback riding. She does musical theater. Those are all things that she loves. And so I don't think that she feels like she misses out because she's able to stay home to do her work. She gets to sleep in if she needs to, or we don't have to do school if she's really not feeling well. We can adjust her schedule. So that's been helpful. And then she does do this camp through the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation during the summer. It's a week long where kids with IBD, it's just for them. So she gets to go. And that really I feel like that is putting some of that magic from childhood back into her life. So I feel like we have tried, one of the things we have tried to do, and I think we're doing pretty well, is just to give her the best life that we can. So right now, that looks like homeschooling so that she gets to do these activities and doesn't feel like she's missing out, and seeking out opportunities like this camp. So just trying to work it that way. But really, sometimes you just got to say, yeah, it sucks. Hopefully, it won't be like this forever, but right now, yeah.
Well, it goes back to your original point of validating where they're at in their situation. And yeah, it's not easy, but there will be some silver linings that come out of it. With autoimmune diseases at any stage in your life, I think flexibility and managing your schedule is critical to getting in remission, staying in remission. Did you make the decision to homeschool once she started experiencing these issues, or was that just always a part of your plan?
Homeschooling was never part of my plan.
Okay.
It's really funny how life is. Like, I thought I would never have a kid with an autoimmune condition. I
Yeah.
thought, that's probably not going to happen. I never thought I'd homeschool, but life shows you things, right? It decides to, whatever I guess you're needing to learn, it's going to find a way for you to learn it. But we started out because of the pandemic. And then we did like virtual kindergarten, which was not a good fit. And then I started homeschooling her for first grade. But I'm really thankful that I did because I started to notice some of these changes that I wouldn't have noticed had she been in person. Like, one of the other thing we talked about, early symptoms, she would get really hot. There was this temperature dysregulation. Like, she would just have to take off all her clothes. Like, we'd be doing school and she'd just be like, I'm so hot. And so I could see that. I could observe the stools. I can't imagine, it has to be difficult if your kid's coming home from school saying my stomach's hurting and I had a bowel movement. Well, what did it look like, right? It's hard to relay that information. So I feel like it was a blessing that I was able to be around her enough and see these patterns that were starting to develop.
Well, props to you that, I mean, you're doing what you need to support her in every way, shape, or form. So that's amazing. I would imagine some of the food stuff and maybe lifestyle changes are rubbing off on the rest of your family. Are your other daughters starting to adopt some more healthy food choices, or have they adjusted anything in their lives just as being around the situation?
Yeah, I think we all have, and they certainly know, like, what foods she can and can't have, or, they're pretty in tune with her. And they're very, I mean, sometimes she has her own special foods, and they're pretty good about, well, that's her food, and, you can eat this other one, but without making it, I don't wanna give anybody, like, a complex about the food, but, they understand. It comes from a place of what's best for her and what I can have over here works for my body, right? One works for one and the other works for the other. So I think that we've all made better choices in food and lifestyle. I mean, I remember reading when we first got the diagnosis that, Crohn's doesn't define you, it refines you. And at the time, I was like, well, I don't, we all want to have these healthier choices, healthier lifestyle, but we don't wanna be forced into making those, right? Crohn's, like,
Yeah,
forces you to do it, but eventually it is for the better. It's still a grieving process, though. You wanna be in control of choosing instead of being having to do it, but like I said, there are some silver linings, so trying to recognize them is helpful.
for sure. Especially with diet, it's always a work in progress. And you mentioned your daughter having anxiety. Was that more around the food or just her situation in general? And how did you help her work through that outside of counseling?
Well, originally, the anxiety was, like, situational with one of her sisters, and
Okay.
yeah, and that kind of but at that point, we didn't know about the Crohn's, but the mind and gut connection is so strong that, like, looking back, I wish her pediatrician would have been just like, "Hey, let's take a minute," or the counselor or somebody, like, "Let's take a minute, and if this isn't quite seeming like it's progressing, then maybe there's a real true medical diagnosis under here." But I understand that that's not every day, so most people, but, I think that with the anxiety with eating, it doesn't seem to bother her as much, but I think it's because there are so many alternatives that she can have, like, if there's ice cream, I can get her a special kind, or, there are recipes I've made that taste pretty good that she'll like. So, I I think it's been reduced, that anxiety, because of the options that are available. I mean, she would love to eat popcorn, but we just have to I said, "Well, maybe one day, but, just not right now."
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic that they are coming out with more and more options for gluten and dairy free. I'm seeing it all the time, even at restaurants too, even though restaurants can be hard just because of how they cook and what other ingredients they use.
We don't really go out to eat. I mean, because it is so hard to find what she can eat, sometimes it can be hard. But there's a lot of, like, vegan places. I mean, there are some, which is more than there used to be. So,
Yeah,
that's that vegan is usually pretty safe, so that's nice to be able to identify that quickly.
for sure. So it's 2 years into the diagnosis at this point?
Let's see. So she was diagnosed in August of 23, but she had had like a year
Okay.
prior of symptoms. So it's almost 3 years. But in my mind, it's three because she was having symptoms at 7. I mean, she was really like flaring, and then it would quiet down, and then it would pick back up again. And I mean, she remembers being 7 and, the doctor saying, "Well, do you wanna talk?" The doctor usually says at the annual checkup, "Is there anything you wanna talk about?" And so she remembers being asked that at 7, and then when she went and she mentioned something about some stomach pains then, but there was not a pattern yet, and she had this anxiety, and so it was kind of attributed to that. But when she gets at her 8-year checkup, she's like, "Oh, yeah, this pain," like and then within weeks, everything just fell apart.
I know you guys are still working through it day by day. There's always ongoing challenges. For families who are still in the thick of it, maybe they haven't gotten a diagnosis or they're newly diagnosed and they're just overwhelmed by it all. What would you share with them to help them get through some of those more trying times?
I would say really, really focusing on that trust, that voice you have inside of you because you know when something's not right. And one of the reasons I do want to speak out and raise awareness is because I know how overwhelmed I felt and I had some medical knowledge and it breaks my heart that some of these parents have never even heard of this and then they're being thrown in. A lot of times these kids are being hospitalized because they've been so sick, which is also something that does not set well with me. Like, I'm like, where, what was happening before? They shouldn't have to get to this point. But I would say, trusting yourself, reaching out, you're going to need support and finding community. And also with something that wasn't really, and I didn't have access to back when we were going through this, but, there's a lot of AI stuff that you can plug in symptoms to, can help you identify. I think that's wonderful. And then you can take what you know, put it in there, and it makes you kind of more educated when you go into the doctor so you can get to the bottom line, right? I do remember at one point with the one pediatric GI, I was just, hoping she would do something. And finally she did something. I'm like, oh, she's done something. But really, it wasn't enough. And if I had had a tool to help me pull up guidelines and things, it would have been, I think, a little better. But hindsight's 2020. So, and I will say that with the IBD community, I feel like when people kind of reach that remission or they reach a place that they're in a better place, that a lot of people will turn around and reach a hand back because they know that it's not good. It's very difficult. And but you don't have to do it alone. And there are doctors who will help and listen. And it's a lot. It's not just, physical, it's the emotional. Getting a counselor is helpful. So for kids and parents, I would strongly suggest that.
Yeah, very much so because it's a lot to handle and seeing someone can help you separate yourself from like the day-to-day chaos that can come with these conditions.
Hmm.
Bridget, how has advocating changed your journey and your perspective?
Well, it's made me a better person. And certainly, I mean, you have these ideals of what you want to do. Um, but this really has kind of pushed me into that arena. And I think it's good. I think that again, hopefully she'll pick up on this when she gets out on her own, be able to handle life, handle this condition. The other day she said something about like she wants to help people with Crohn's, like, So I think having that mindset, right? That's the best thing you can do for as a parent. Um, because she's going to create her world where she's accepted, and she's going to help people along the way. And that's a really fulfilling thing to do. So I do think it's helped. It's lit something in me, right? I just have this very strong desire to raise awareness with parents and healthcare providers. I don't think that it needs to take 2 to 3 years for a diagnosis. It's absurd, but like you said, it's experiences, and it's willing a provider willing to listen, or a parent willing to listen to their kid, so it's all cyclical, I guess, but we're also in a better place too, right, at the moment, and of course, things can change, but, what it took to get here, and you've learned stuff along the way, and you'll fight to get back, right? I remember feeling when she was so sick, like, is this ever gonna be different? Is this how life is? And when she started on her Humira and her lab started to change for the better, but she was still having pain so often, I asked the doctor, I'm like, is this remission? Because I don't think this is remission. Like, this can't be. So, yeah, I feel like advocating just helps you get to the best life you can get.
For sure. You're an incredible example, and I have no doubt you're raising an incredible daughter. Bridget, I have one last question for you. As a mom of a daughter with Crohn's, what does invisible strength mean to you?
Well, I've thought about this for a while. So, I come back to that emotional regulation where you're showing up, just the fact that you're showing up consistently, right? And a lot of times you're trying to be patient, and you're helping step out of that fight or flight. You are setting this great example for them to be so that they can function in the world, so that they have this strength. People can't see it, But that's kind of the beauty of it too, right? They can't see it, but you know when you to stay, you know when to leave, you know what's best for you, and you don't need to be told, you don't need to be validated because you already know. So I feel like that's really the true invisible strength. And I needed a little bit of it for myself, and I'm happy to model it for her, and it will, I feel like, be the key to managing it really, I mean, it's really the key to managing life in general, but
Yeah.
really, really important for somebody who can just be get sick just from, like, stress, right? Like, stress can cause flares. So being able to step back from that and be like, "Hey, this isn't mine to carry," or what can I really do about this right now? If there's nothing I can do, then maybe I just need to let it go, or I don't need to react to this. That people in life want to pull you into these emotional reactions, and then you carry it, and then you end up getting sick. So I would say that invisible strength really stems from that emotional regulation.
Beautiful. And I do think you're modeling invisible strength perfectly for your daughter. It's been wonderful talking to you. Bridget, on Instagram and elsewhere, where can people follow you and learn more about your journey?
Well, we have a page, Life with Pediatric Crohn's, where we talk about Crohn's and Um, I think we're gonna do some more daily life stuff because that's nice to see somebody just, like, living life. It doesn't have to Crohn's is a big part of our life, but it doesn't have to be the entire thing. So, I think that's a healthy boundary, right? So, modeling
For
that too.
sure. We have our conditions, but they do not define us.
Uh-huh.
Bridget, thank you so much for being here and being open about your story. Like I said, you're the first parent of an autoimmune warrior we've had, and your insights and perspectives will be invaluable to our community. And we'll make sure to put your page in our description and your Instagram handle. But thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Peace.
Yeah. Bye-bye.